Hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming and braving the cold, wintry weather. Thanks for being with us. So today we have two talks, and the first one is by Raphael. And if you ever wondered what on earth is a wombat, he's the man to tell you all about it. So thanks very much.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. All right. So, how many people have seen a wombat before? Nice. How many people know what a wombat is? Okay, that's a decent number. All right. So, yeah, we've got some educating to do tonight, but it should be pretty fun. They're pretty remarkable creatures. But first, I want to start quite far back. So, we're somewhere in here. Imagine yourself as an alien species. You know, you've got your spaceship, however it looks, UFO, whatever, and you're searching for intelligent life in the universe. You go through the Milky Way, you find the solar system that we're currently in. You see that there's a blue planet here that seems to have water, which could be life. You realize there's actually an intelligent species on there. Well, they appear to be intelligent, but then you intercept their communications and you realize, oh, maybe we should turn back. But just before that, you actually do some more surface scanning on the planet, and you find these interesting patterns on the landscapes. Does anyone know what this is?
Ice crystals?
Wait, you already know. No, you're not allowed to answer. This is actually a wombat warren complex. So basically, these are the little burrows that wombats make, and you can see these little trails between all the little burrows. They're all kind of interconnected. They're quite a social species, actually, although we really don't know much about their social nature because they're very hard to study. You know, they come out at night time and they're very shy. So anyway, as you're an alien species, you're doing more research about what these interesting things are. You go to the internet. You realize, oh, these humans have this thing called the internet. They encode information using bits and everything. You have to trawl through all these memes and GIFs, all this junk on the internet to actually find out a bit about wombats. And once you're finally there, you come up to this thing, called a scientific paper. You realize humans have discovered this thing called science, you know, the ability to learn new things about the natural world. And there's this paper from 1980 called Wombats Detected from Space, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, how many other animals can we detect from space, really? I can't think of any, really, apart from maybe us, but that doesn't count. But anyway, some people from the 80s used satellite imagery, and they could actually detect these wombat burrows, which is pretty cool, really. So before I talk a bit about wombats and what they are, I think it's maybe helps to understand a bit more about mammals. So, you know, we are mammals ourselves. What is the defining feature of a mammal? Well, like breasts are actually the defining feature. So mammalia is mammaries, so it means, you know, breast. So essentially all mammals give milk to the young. That's like one of their defining features of what a mammal is. This here is a phylogenetic tree of mammals, current existing mammals on our planet. And so how to read this tree is essentially, it's kind of like a family tree. So you can kind of trace the leaves here are kind of the species that are currently existing, and you can trace back their history all the way back to when they all shared an ancestor. And so with mammals, we currently have three major groups. We have the monotremes up the top. And so this is a very divergent branch. As you can see, the time here, you might not be able to see it, but that's on the order of about 170 million years, where we shared a common ancestor with these monotremes. You've probably seen monotremes before, platypus, echidna, really bizarre animals. These mammals are really cool. They actually lay eggs, which is really bizarre. You know, we give live birth. Most mammals give live birth, but these lay eggs, which is really fantastic. The other form of mammals are called placental mammals. So we are also placental mammals, as well as some of our, things we know very well, like dogs, rabbits, cows, giraffes, all the kind of things that we know mammals to be. But there's also a very rich and diverse lineage of mammals called marsupials. I learned the Danish name the other day is wombat, which is kind of cute. It means kind of like, I guess, pouch animal or pocket animal. And these are really an amazing lineage of mammals. Again, they separate, we shared a common ancestor with them about 170 million years ago. It's a very long time, so dinosaurs are still around on the Earth. And that's when our ancestors separated. And there's an amazing diversity of forms of marsupials across the world. Australia, which is where I'm from, is home to over 200 species of marsupials, the richest diversity of marsupials in the world. So, things like koalas you probably know about pretty well, kangaroos. It's a very obscure things like the honey possum here, which is a really cute little critter. Quokkas, possums, numbats, the thing with the big tongue here, which eats ants. And also the marsupial mole, which is a very cool one. There's a whole amazing diversity of marsupials on the planet. And so what is a marsupial? So the defining feature of a marsupial is that they have a pouch, obviously. And so this is what it looks like when one is born. They're born extremely young, only after about 2 to 4 weeks. Jelly bean size, tiny. And it basically starts its first major journey of its life by crawling out from the birth canal and into the pouch, which is a pretty amazing journey for such a small little thing. As you can see, they've got very strongly, very well developed front arms that allows them to kind of crawl up. And once they reach the pouch, they're in the safety of that environment. They attach to a teat, so that's actually a teat inside the pouch, which is pretty amazing. So here it will basically latch on, really firmly latch on, and get the milk from its mother and develop for the rest of its life. So pretty remarkable stuff. That's a kangaroo pouch. This is a photo I took from a yellow-footed rock wallaby. So wallaby is kind of like a kangaroo, but kind of smaller generally. And just to show you again the scale of how small these things are and how fragile they are. It's really amazing. You'll notice there's actually 2 teats. That's also another interesting thing. Some marsupials have multiple teats in their pouch, and so the pouch will actually go to different teats at different stages of their development. And these different teats have different milk compositions as well, which they need for their certain development, which is, again, pretty cool. And then they still stay in the pouch until they have fur as well. So here's one which I think the mother is getting pretty annoyed at for staying in the pouch for a bit too long, but I think this one's about to be going out pretty soon. Okay, so we know a bit about mammals now, and marsupials. So what is a wombat? I was going to bring one in to show you guys, but unfortunately Danish customs wouldn't let it through. It's still there, waiting. I need to, looking forward to it. So this is my software that I have that I'm hoping to bring to Denmark and hopefully have at home. But okay, in terms of wombats, they're classified into 3 different types of species. So we have the bearded-nosed wombat here, which is one that probably most people know about. They live on the east coast of Australia, so all the way from New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania as well. We also have the northern hairy-nosed wombat, which is a critically endangered species of wombat. There's only about 300 to 400 left, and they're only in 2 tiny little reserves, kind of fenced-off parks, essentially. So they're slowly recovering, but they're not doing too well. And the one that I'm going to be focusing on a bit today is the southern hairy-nosed wombat. This is the one that I've been working on over the past few years. And this occurs mostly across South Australia, as well as into Western Australia a little bit as well. Okay, so what are the wombat superpowers? Okay, so one is they're the largest burrowing mammal on the planet. Here's Patrick. He was from Ballarat Wildlife Park. 38 kilograms of pure muscle. These guys, they don't have any fat on them at all. We've done CT scans on them to look at the kind of fat and muscle composition, and they're extremely muscular. So Patrick was a really big bloke. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2017 at the age of 31, which is pretty remarkable. So here's what a wombat burrow looks like. This is the southern hairy-nosed wombat burrow. A photo I took from one of the field sites we work in. And as you can see, they really are quite an amazing feature of the landscape. They really do manage to move quite a lot of soil and dirt around to make these little burrows. They use their really amazingly sharp and tough claws to do this. And a really cool thing about wombats as well, right, is that if you're going to be digging a lot, you don't want, and you have a pouch young, you don't want all this dirt to go into your pouch, right? So wombats have evolved such that their pouches face backwards away from where the dirt would be coming in from when the mother is digging, which is fantastic. Really good little adaptation there. It's cool, we saw this from the satellite imagery before, but here's just showing on the ground what these kind of trails look like. You can see there's really well-demarked trails across between different burrows, which is cool. So we obviously, being very social, moving between burrows quite a lot, and there's still so much we have to learn about this. So why make a burrow? Why is a burrow such a great idea? Well, as you probably know, Australia can get bloody hot. In summer it can get over 50 degrees Celsius on the surface temperature. And that poses a lot of challenges, right? You're going to lose a lot of water, you need to expend a lot of energy to kind of sweat, and that's not a good thing. So by having a burrow, you can kind of control the temperature at which you're living at. So in the heat of summer, 45 degrees Celsius outside, it can be only 26 degrees in your burrow, which is nice and air conditioned. Likewise for winter, it can get down to 0 degrees, nothing like Copenhagen or Sweden, not that cold down there, but still, 0 degrees is not nice. The burrow can again kind of shelter and buffer the wombat from these extreme swings in temperature. And what's cool with wombats too is that they can also kind of modulate their body temperature a bit. They can lower their metabolic rate. If there's not a lot of food outside, they can kind of huddle down in their little burrow for days and days, not having to eat. And they can lower their body temperature. Because if you can lower your body temperature, then you don't need to have to use as much energy to produce heat, etc. So that's a really important adaptation, is the burrow. The next one, which I think is really cool, is their teeth. So their teeth actually constantly grow, which is quite interesting. On the left here you have a rat skull, a black rat skull. And rats also have incisors that constantly grow, because they chew a lot, right? The rats chew everything, your wires, whatever. So as a result, they have teeth that constantly grow. And the same is true for wombats as well, which is quite interesting. And this is an example of convergent evolution, where you have two very different species, right, that don't have a very common ancestry, both evolving a similar feature, a similar adaptation. And for wombat, this makes sense, right? Because if you're living to an old age and you're constantly chewing grasses like this all day, you really want to make sure your teeth last for quite a while, right? You need to have constantly new growing teeth. Wombats are also very fast. If you look online, there's actually a little video cartoon that someone's made comparing Usain Bolt to a wombat. And they were convinced that a wombat could win against Usain Bolt in a 100-meter sprint. Personally, I think they probably could, because they're bloody fast. The way we kind of study them, I'll talk about it a bit later, is we actually catch them with nets. And if they get to jump on you, they're gone. You've got no chance at all. And I mean, I'm not Usain Bolt, so it's definitely not. They also really like open butt scratch. So this is true. I mean, they've got pretty short arms and legs. It's really hard to reach that area, and so they have to use their environment to their advantage. Here's some photos from the field. You can see a nice little path that's been, walked on quite a few times, leading to a tree. If we go closer to this tree, you'll see there's some kind of marks here. It looks like it's been kind of worn down a bit. And suspiciously, it's the same height for where a wombat butt would be. So my guess is that wombats have been, using this post to, scratch those itches. And here's the best post that I've seen. This is a great view of the Murray River, and this is a really, great piece of real estate for a butt scratching post overlooking the river. Okay, so these are some, facts about wombats that you may not have heard about. But I also want to talk about what really is a wombat? So we'll go a bit deeper now and talk about some recent research about microbiology as well, which sounds like a very weird topic to link with wombats, but they're very much related, and I think they're very much a part of what a wombat's identity is as well, as the microbes that it carries with it. So bear with me on this. So microbes, I'm not sure if you're aware of, they're kind of everywhere, on our skin, in our beer, they make beer for us. A lot of our fermented foods, like cheese and stuff, have microbes, which make it so tasty. Microbes are pretty much everywhere, and there's a lot of them as well. So one way we can measure how much of a living thing there is by looking at the carbon that organism has. Because carbon is such a very essential building block of life. And so essentially some scientists did some estimates on where all the carbon lies in Earth's ecosystems. And so each of these kind of blocks is a gigaton of carbon, which is a kind of unfathomable amount of carbon in my mind, to be honest. But regardless of that, just look at this here, right? So bacteria, these type of microorganisms, have about 70 gigatons of carbon. And these two little blocks here are all the animals, 22 gigatons. And all the humans here are really a measly portion of all the carbon in the world. So the takeaway point here is that bacteria, microbes, fungi, they represent the dominant life forms on our planet. So they've been around for a long time as well. So how does this relate to wombats though? Well, wombats had to eat, right? And how do wombats thrive? How do they actually thrive in their environment? So they eat grass mostly, or small shrubs. And if we tried to do that, we would be dead within a week, right? Like, how do these wombats get energy and all their essential nutrients from such a poor source of food? These aren't even the nice grass that we have on our lawns. These are really gnarly, dry, fiber-rich plants. Turns out the answer is in their guts. So this is a wombat gastrointestinal tract, which is pretty whopping massive. It's around 11 meters long. So a given wombat is about 1 meter in length, and a wombat GI tract is 11 meters, so it's like 11 times the body length of a wombat is devoted to the gastrointestinal tract, which is pretty amazing. And so the reason they have this massive surface area in their gut is they house all these rich diversity of microbes or bacteria that live inside the gut. And these microbes actually ferment the food, kind of in a kind of similar way to, I guess, how we ferment some of our foods. This fermentation breaks down the plant cell walls, because the plant cell walls have a lot of carbon and energy in them. But animal proteins, animal enzymes can't actually break them down. So what the wombat has to do is actually outsource this to the bacteria that lives inside the guts. So people have estimated that the fermentation that bacteria in the gut of wombats provide to their host is about 70% of the wombat's energy budget. So in other words, if you didn't have the microbes in the gut, the wombat, you wouldn't have a wombat, basically. So it's a pretty important thing. Onto a different type of microbe in wombats. I'll talk a little bit about a bit of research we did a couple of years ago, looking into the pouch. So not many people have looked into the microbes in the pouch before, and so we were interested in this and decided to do a little study on wombats. So again, this is Cecilia Weiss. She's actually from Copenhagen, which is a very small world. She actually came to Australia and did her master's, and I supervised her project. And yeah, she was really interested in the wombats in general, and the pouch and microbiology. So we put together a little project looking at these. And so again, the big kind of question we're looking at here is, how do these joeys survive, right? They're born so young, they don't have an immune system. They don't have an adaptive immune system yet. They crawl into a kind of a pouch, which is a humid environment, right? There's probably lots of bacteria around growing. How do these small defenseless joeys survive in that environment? What's going on inside the pouch? So to actually study this, I'm a microbiologist and a molecular biologist by training. I don't know much about animals before I started this. So I had to ask around and look for some people who are experts in this area. And so this is David Taggart, also known as Tags, because in Australia we like to use nicknames a lot. And Tags has been studying wombats for nearly 30 years now. And he's just the leading expert in wombats. Really great guy as well, really nice, down-to-earth dude. So I reached out to him and asked for his help. And he said, yeah, oh, come on, mate, let's go and study some wombats. So we did this research here in Adelaide. So I've lived in Adelaide for the past 7 years. Have people heard of Adelaide before, out of curiosity? Hands up, yeah? Okay. Woo. Most people, it's kind of a pretty smallish city. Most people hear about Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, Tasmania, Hobart, but Adelaide's kind of like the gem of Australia, I think. Not many people know about it, but it's a really wonderful place. So anyway, this research took place over here in Adelaide, in a small little kind of farming area about 200 kilometres northeast of Adelaide City itself. So we have the right people, we have Tags. We also need the right tools in order to study wombats and catch them. And so Tags over the years has evolved various ways of catching them from the scratch, basically. No one really knew how to catch wombats before Tags came along and trial and error, engineered different ways to do this. So here's the shearing shed that we actually, is the home base for the operations, for the fieldwork. This shearing shed is about 100 years old or more, and it's been used for sheep shearing and stuff like that for a long time. Not for a very long time, but it hasn't been used very recently, but I think 100 years ago it was extensively used for sheep and wool. You can see here is a custom ute, or do you call it utes in Denmark? No? I don't know how to describe that, but basically it's kind of like a car with like a flat tray at the end. It's actually customly built, so it's got these little handles for people to stand on and hold on to when you're on there. We also have these big whopping nets here, you can see, these big metal nets, which are used for catching the wombats themselves. Here's some shots inside the actual shearing shed, just showing it's really, really old school. You can see the the kind of old tools and motors used for the shearing implements themselves. And here's a view of what it looks like inside. We actually have our kitchen here as well. We stay. Which is pretty cool. And so we go out in the dead of night because wombats are mostly active at night time. They prefer to come out at night because obviously, they can't see very well, and they'll be scared of predators if they go out in daytime. Usually it's also cooler at night time as well, so if it's been a very hot day, they'll come out, it's much cooler, they can better thermoregulate, not lose as much moisture. And so you have some really amazing skies in South Australia. Like there's no light pollution at all, and so you can get some beautiful shots of the Milky Way on your field trip. And so how do we actually catch these wombats then? So we go out, we have about 5 or 6 people on the ute. We have a driver, we have someone with a spotlight, a really high-powered spotlight. We have a few people on the back of the ute with the big nets. And essentially we just drive very slowly, very quietly through the paddocks, looking at the wombat warrens. If we see a wombat on there, we shine the spotlight on it. And for some reason, the spotlight seems to kind of daze them for a bit. And so they'll kind of like stop and like look around what's going on. And at that point, the runners jump off the ute and run through this kind of rugged terrain. It's pretty dangerous because like you've only got one light shining towards you. And you can see these kind of like little shadows, which you're not sure if the shadow is like a small depression or like a big whopping hole. Thankfully I haven't injured myself, but I think Tags actually broke his collarbone once, like falling into a wombat hole. So it can be pretty dangerous. But essentially what we'll do is we'll spotlight them and then run out and try and net them essentially on their warren. Also the best way to do it as well is like if they're off the warren, sometimes they'll be exploring a bit away from their burrow. And in that situation, it's a really good opportunity to kind of like get at them because they're going to run straight to their warren. They know exactly where it is. You have to kind of get between them and their warren and capture them. So anyway, we net them. We put them in a Hessian sack. It takes about 2 or 3 people to actually lift one up and put them in, and they're not very happy to be put in a sack. But surprisingly, when they're actually in the sack, they become really quiet. They actually fall asleep on the back of the ute, which we hear them snoring quite often actually on the back of the ute. So I'm not sure why that is. I mean, maybe because they grew up in like a little pouch. Maybe it's like, oh, I'm back with mum, like back in my little pouch. So anyway, we take them back. The next day they sleep in the shearing shed. In the morning we give them like a sedative because you don't want 30 kilos of muscle kind of trying to claw at you or bite you. So we give them a little sedative to relax them, put them to sleep. And then what we did is we took some samples. So we used these little swabs here to take various samples. We're really interested in the pouch, so we took some pouch swabs. And so to give you an idea of just the scale of what we're looking at with bacteria, let's zoom in on this swab here. So this is some electron micrographs that we did on these swabs. This is the kind of what a swab looks like, this particular one. So this is 100 times magnification, going to 500 times magnification. These aren't bacteria, by the way. This is actually still the swab, like fibers. Keep going. And finally, at about 21,000 times magnification, you can see these rods and little circles. These are the bacteria, which is what we're actually interested in looking at and studying. So it's pretty amazing that we can actually study these things at this small scale. We don't actually look at them to study them. We actually use the DNA, which I'll talk about a bit later. But here are the perks of working with wombats, right? You get to take some nice selfies when they're slightly drugged. You get to put them on your lap and take a photo with them, which is really cute. And also their little joeys or young are just extremely cute as well. So it's a real pleasure to be able to actually handle them and work with them. Once we've taken our samples and we've done our measurements as well, Tags is also very interested in measuring various aspects of their physiology, their health. He's been monitoring that through time as well. So once we finish our measurements, we take them back to their burrow that we caught them at and just let them walk through. Some of them are more reluctant. They want to stay in the sack, so we have to kind of give them a shove. And some of them are a bit dazed, so we kind of do door-to-door service, like actually post them down the hole as well. So anyway, back at the lab, we took our samples, we did some molecular biology, we studied the DNA of these bacteria. And using this DNA, we were able to figure out what types of bacteria are present in the pouch. What types of bacteria, how many different types or species of bacteria are there, etc. And so here are some of the results we have. So here are some kind of box plots and dots. So each of these dots is a sample. Here we have the diversity of bacteria. So this is like hundreds, basically, the diversity. And here's just showing the different type of pouch samples we had. So obviously, wombats can have different, their pouch changes depending on their reproductive status, right? If they're very young, like a subadult, they have a pouch that looks like a belly button. It's not very developed at all. As they become more reproductively active, it starts to deepen. You get some secretions of various compounds. We're not really sure what they are. And then here's one with an actual pouch inside it. You can see it's kind of deepened even more. And so these are just showing you like the different types of pouch samples we've taken from different parts of the reproductive cycle. And so the results here show basically from right to left, the more reproductively active wombats. And so what's happening here, it seems, is that bacterial diversity is drastically dropping when the mother is basically has either pouch young inside its pouch, or it's getting ready to have a new pouch young emerge into the pouch. And so what we think is happening here is that basically the mother is filtering out all these bacteria that might be in the environment. It's basically either selecting a certain few bacteria, or it's just trying to kill as much bacteria as it can to basically protect its pouch young. Here's also some other plots as well. Here's just showing kind of like, you don't have to worry about the colors and stuff, it's a bit of a mess, but these are basically different types of bacteria, so in different kind of color groups. And so again, from kind of more reproductively active to, less to more reproductively active, you see a big drop in diversity. And also there's kind of 4 or 5 bacteria that we always find that seem to be in the pouch of wombats that have a pouch young or they're getting ready. We looked at in more detail on these bacteria, like where have they been found before again. And so we searched to a big database, and we found that the best matches that we had were from microbes found in the pouch of the Tama wallaby, which is another species of marsupial, which is very cool. I've done some more further work on this as well, on other species, and it looks like there definitely seem to be some microbes that seem to be conserved across all marsupials. So one hypothesis I have for this is that like maybe there's also some beneficial bacteria in the pouch as well that are kind of going along in the next generation, and maybe these bacteria are kind of fighting off other bad bacteria. Sounds like a crazy idea. There's still a lot of research to do here, but you know this can make sense to me, right? Like if you're a bacteria living in a pouch, you want your host to survive, right? Like if your host survives, then you have an environment to live in, right? So this is some ongoing research that I'm really interested in the future, trying to figure out what these microbes are doing. Can we use them to maybe help the, like the breeding of other marsupials as well? Because basically some marsupials it's been really hard to breed them in captivity. And breeding marsupials in captivity is really important for conservation, right? You need to boost their numbers up. And so maybe some of the bacteria in the pouch, they don't have the right ones. So can we maybe get some from the wilds and put them back into the pouches? And would that help? Only time will tell. So what really is a wombat then? Well, they're a cute, amazing animal that are really good at surviving in these extreme environments. They engineer ecosystems. I didn't talk much about this, but a lot of other animals can use wombat burrows as well, like during the heat. So kangaroos, lizards, a whole bunch of range of different animals will actually go inside these burrows when it's extremely hot as well, just to kind of escape the oppressive heat of Australia. And wombats are also an ecosystem themselves. They host billions of bacteria that live in their guts, some in their pouches, etc. And so what does this mean about what it means to be an animal, right? Like what about us as well? What is it to be a human? Are we also the microbes in our guts as well? This is a really interesting question, and there's a lot of really cool research going on in this space in the future. So I had to thank a lot of people. So Tags, obviously, for all his wisdom and experience and wildlife work. A lot of the PhD students who helped along the way as well, doing field work. The wombats who maybe reluctantly were our subjects and abducted for this research. As well as University of Adelaide, Research Council of Australia, and the Schultz Foundation. And so yeah, any questions?